Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Lords of Infinity. So, in the last episode, we kind of still just, went over some of the introductory parts of the game. We noticed some slight changes and things, and how, of course, me playing from a actual loaded save kind of, had some different tweaks and stuff in there, but not a whole lot of difference from what I've played in a demo and stuff like that. However, I did say that I wanted to go back and kind of change the marriage aspect because for whatever reason, I don't think I have a romance with Lady Wells, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know if I did in the last game. I guess I didn't. I could have sworn I did, but I guess for whatever reason, it's not showing up on here because usually there's a choice in one of your conversations with the mother, with your mother, that you can have where you talk about a previous engagement. And when you talk about the previous engagement, it'll have another option down there saying that, well, you can't, think how are going to work out because there's someone else you met, and then you bring up the whole Lady Wells thing and stuff like that. So for whatever reason, that's not showing up this time around. So in this case, since it seems like I don't have that flag going on as far as things that I've triggered and things like that, I'll just go ahead and settle for the girl who is at the estate. I've actually never played this particular part, and I'm not sure how that's going to work out since I do plan on staying in the capital, but we'll see how things go. So, anywho, your mother watches you dine with silent indulgence at first, seemingly happy just to have you at her table. Again, even though circumstances have technically made it your table. She waits patiently as you go through your first portions with ferocious speed. Only once you've begun to pace yourself does she address you. Darren, she begins, isn't it about time you begin thinking of marriage? Your fork pauses halfway from your lips to the table. You try your hardest not to perform an involuntary impression of a man suddenly struck on the forehead with a club. Marriage, mother, you manage? She nods decisively. Yes, dear, marriage. That thing people do to conceive an heir. I suppose we shall need to find you a wife, and quickly too. You're not getting any younger, and were it not for the war, you would have no doubt already found a lady of the appropriate disposition and standing, and sired 2 or 3 heirs by her. She pauses for a moment, finger to her lips in thought. If I recall correctly, your father was trying to get you set up with the Benivera girl down the road when the war started. Whatever became of that? Yes, you remember that, though only barely. Your father had been rather set on helping you find a respectable match, especially seeing as the son of a poor baron was not exactly the most glittering of prospects for any Bane-blooded lady of tilted family. The fact that one lived only a few hours' ride away had rather been a stroke of luck, and negotiations had entered a most crucial phase just as the war interrupted. In the end, I'm going to say I agreed to an engagement with some enthusiasm. Yes, I remember, you reply, though much of the matter remains foggy in your recollection. Arrangements were made, I think. In truth, it has been a long time since you thought of Julia de All Benevera. War did not give you much time for such things. You hadn't had time to get to know each other. Though clearly you had considered her to have at least some positive qualities. Why else would you have agreed to marry her all those years ago? But you're not the man you were when you went to Antar. The war has changed you greatly, and surely the intervening time must have changed her as well. Perhaps you will not find her quite as pleasant as you did so long ago. Your mother's eyes narrow as she suddenly leans in. Darren, she asks, voice laden with concern. You seem troubled. Are you quite all right? You nod your head hastily. Yes, mother, just thinking. She frowns. If you're having second thoughts on the matter, she leaves the rest of the question unsaid. It seems your innermost thoughts were not hidden as deeply as you thought. Or perhaps your mother simply read your mood from half a lifetime of practice. You must tell me truthfully, she says quietly. Do you truly wish to pursue this engagement? And this is the part where, again, if you have a romance going on, then it should show up. I haven't tried it with Katarina. I do have a playthrough that I just did yesterday. I actually went back and played Sabers of Infinity and Guns of Infinity, and I have a save where I'm going to do the other mission where you go and try and capture the princess and so on and so forth. and get some ransom money. I'm gonna go ahead and do that one, but I think I'm talking to Katarina in that one, so I'll be able to see in my spare time how that works out. But yeah, usually here you would see another option as well, telling you that you can bring up the whole thing about Lady Wells and so on and so forth. But yeah, we'll say I do. I will see the matter concluded at soonest opportunity. Your mother breathes a visible sigh of relief. Good then. It seems you already have the matter well in hand. The smile she gives you is sheepish, almost shy. Forgive a foolish old woman for meddling. There's nothing to forgive, you reply generously. You were only trying to help. She nods. Then I thank you for putting up with me. No sooner are the words said does she light up with an expression that's anything but shy. Now then, enough of serious talk. How about dessert? All right, so this is kind of just going over what we've already been through. I don't think anything is really that different. Yep, I think this is pretty much the same. Oh, this is just going back to Benivera. So, Benivera's house is not so different from your own residence. The drive is perhaps less hold, the walls in less disrepair, the outbuildings in better condition, but as a whole, it is of the same model as your house and the perhaps 100 other country houses which dot the Salt Coast. Too worn and too cramped to be the stately hall of a great lord, far too grand and ancient to be the home of a mere farmer or tradesman. Lord Benivera is a solidly built man, his gray hair tied back and curled, as had been the fashion among the country nobility when your father was young. You think he would have made a good dragoon officer were he 20 years younger. Over cups of coffee and plates of biscuits, the two of you discuss matters almost perfectly devised to be incapable of causing offense. Yet as the minutes tick past on the heavy pendulum clock in Lord Benivera's parlor, and you discuss such inane matters as the weather and the harvest and the state of the roads, the real reason for your coming here seems to take on a greater and greater urgency. When Benivera finally asks you your intentions regarding his daughter, you're almost overjoyed to reply. Lord Benivera is no less contented by your reply. Contented enough to immediately call for his daughter so that you might tell your betrothed of the progress of your engagement directly. Lady Julia de All Benivera has grown a great deal since you last saw her. No longer a slip of a girl. A slip of a girl? What? She has matured into a slim, demure woman with long, mousy brown hair and a delicate snub nose. Her hazel eyes brighten with happiness when you inform her that you mean to carry on with your engagement, and that you're likely to be married not too far in the future, as soon as you're properly established in your new title. As she goes on to speak happily of her hopes for a wedding and children, it occurs to you that neither of you actually know each other all that well. You had spoken a few times before you went to war, but that was almost 12 years ago. You were no more than a callow youth, and she's not too far out of childhood. You know nothing of her interests, and she knows nothing of yours, of her fears and apprehensions, of her likes and preferences. You know no more than she would know of your experience in Antar. While it is generally considered a piece of common wisdom that affection comes after a wedding rather than before, that doesn't mean you ought to swear your oaths without any understanding of the woman you are to spend what is likely to be the rest of your life with. Perhaps it would be best to reach out, even in this early stage. It certainly wouldn't hurt to try to establish some personal friendship with her, so long as you don't end up coming across as a bore. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have any charisma, but let's see if I can pull something off, because I don't know how this really works. Like, I don't know if this is actually good or decent to get by in certain conversations, because I know this Sabers of Infinity, and well, the Infinity series is a little bit weirder when it comes to certain stats, because in most choice of games, it's typically a situation where you have a stat. If you choose a stat, or if you choose a choice that is regarding a stat, then that's pretty much, it's purely dependent upon this stat. So if I tried a soldiering option or something like that, then it would be purely based off of my soldiering skills, and you would kind of clearly know if you're capable of doing certain things. But in of Infinity, or the Infinity series in general, a lot of times, it's not just whether or not you have high charisma. It's also whether you have charisma and intellect based off of this situation, or if you've done certain things and that kind of plays into certain things. So I never really am sure whether or not I can pull off certain things, but to hell with it. I will try. I don't know if I should choose I have charm enough to make a good impression, at least. Surely we have some common interests we might bond over. I'd rather not be too forward. I'll listen rather than speak. I kind of want to choose this middle option just because I'm not sure, but at the same time, earlier I did make one slight difference. Instead of just not telling the villagers anything and not telling my staff anything, I tried to inspire them, and I managed to pull it off. So maybe I can pull this off. I have charm enough to make a good impression, at least. It soon become apparent that you may have overestimated your abilities in some regard. You do not fail for lack of trying. Every time an opening seems to present itself, you make some attempt to insert yourself into the conversation for the purpose of providing some subtle compliment or small flattery. Yet no matter how many times you try, your words seem to have little effect. Every single one of your sallies either seems to sail past the intended recipient's head entirely, or worse yet, is met only with confusion. In truth, you seem to have had little effect on Lady Julia's disposition towards you as a butter knife might have on the steel cuirass. Indeed, after your first half dozen tries, Lord Benivera and his daughter seem to be looking upon your attempt less with bemused indulgence and more with an increasing sense of annoyance. In the end, you have little choice but to retreat, lest you do more harm than good. Lady Julia is still cordial enough to invite you to visit again, but you fear she may be motivated more by courtesy than genuine affection. Good Lord. At least she has offered you another chance. You will have to do better next time. And see, that's what I mean. Like, I'm not sure, because again, I managed to pull off the thing at the estate, but that may have been a situation where stats didn't really come into play. It may have just been a situation where it's just you can kind of do whatever you want to and it doesn't really matter. I kind of want to go back and replay this though to see what the other option would have got. Hold on a second. All right, so I've made it back. I'm not gonna do this too often, but I just don't want to worry about this type of stuff because again, the estate stuff, I just don't want to be bothered with it at all, and I don't want to have to deal with a whole bunch of crap at the house. It's already bad enough that I have a gigantic debt, and I have no idea how I'm going to get out of that. I have seen certain things about options as far as the capital goes as making money, but I don't know. We'll cross that bridge when we get there, but I really do not want to have to worry about this. So, let's try to say, surely we have some common interests we might bond over. True, you may not be a knight of the green with a life devoted to study and the advancement of knowledge, but your life has given you no small amount of experience in a wide range of subjects. Your wife-to-be may not share all of your interests, but surely you will find that the two of you share at least one or two commonalities. Indeed, as she continues to ponder the prospect of raising your children, you find a rather excellent opening. What about education, you ask? They will have the appropriate range of tutors, of course, but I believe there are various gaps in the conventional education which we may have to cover ourselves. Her face lights up anew. It seems you've hit the mark. Yes, I quite agree, she replies. When it is time to educate our son, do you think some grounding in philosophy outside the traditional Ken schools might be appropriate? You nod enthusiastically. Courtship may be unknown territory for you, but philosophy? That is something that you are more than capable of discussing knowledgeably. I would recommend Darian Van Holt, you reply. His writing is often seen as purely military in application, but I feel his belief in the responsibilities of the most immediate figure of authority may be of great use to anyone destined for a position of power. For the next hour, the two of you continue back and forth in animated conversation. Lady Julia proves better read than you might have first expected, and her opinions, though somewhat conventional, prove well-founded and thought out. You find her a joy to converse with, and indeed it is only when Lord Benivera draws your attention to the hour that you are compelled to pull yourself away. As for Lady Julia, she's still discussing one last point with you as she walks with you all the way to your coach. Smiling brightly, she attracts a promise from you to see her again. She's still smiling as your coach pulls away and begins the long trip back to your estate. Okay, so that basically just boiled down to I ain't that guy when it comes to, charm and riz. I don't know what all you these folks call it nowadays, but I ain't that guy when it comes to that. I am the smart guy. I need to stick to doing smart things and not be stupid and try and, be funny and all that crap. I ain't the one. So we will try to stick to more intelligent choices or whatnot. But we'll see how that goes, and we'll see if I'm going to have those options, because sometimes you just don't have those options. A pleasant surprise awaits you upon your return to the estate. A battered old horse van, direct from Crittenden, and aboard a familiar face, or rather perhaps a familiar form. Thunderer was your personal mount in Antar, and now, by a slow, circassious route, your old battle companion has returned to your side. Thunderer isn't as young as he once was, certainly not as hot-tempered, but a Tokaran heavy cavalry horse is an imposing sight at almost any age, and after a few moments' inspection, you're satisfied that your great stallion's mighty thewed body and glossy black coat will inspire as much admiration among your friends and tenants as it did terror among the Antari. Alas, you have only enough time to arrange the transfer of beast, tack, and saddle to a new place in your dilapidated stables before you must cut your reunion short. Your desk awaits, and there is still no small amount of work to be done. So I got my horse back. Nice. For the next few weeks, as the last of the harvest is brought in and the last of the leaves fall from the trees, your time is occupied by three matters, each of no small importance. The first is perhaps the one that consumes the most of your effort, the touring of your estates. Every day, you spend the early morning riding through the pitted and muddy streets of Rumburg village, wrapped up in a heavy overcoat to ward off the chill, greeting your tenants as they go out to their day's labor. At a glance, you have no doubt that the whole practice seems rather frivolous. To spend hours riding about doing nothing but saying good morning, and saints go with you, to men and women who only know you by name. Yet it is the very fact that they do not know you by appearance which prompts you to such activity. You are, after all, their new lord, the man to whom their rent and obedience are now owed. War has taught you well enough that an officer who cannot have his voice or face recognized by his men is one who cannot command at all. You doubt it is very much different with the administration of an estate. So, every morning you continue to ride out. Even as the morning grows colder and wetter and the roads start to degenerate into a morass of mud, you continue until your tenants not only recognize you but begin to receive your occasional inquiries with a genuine warmth. 1 second. All right. Your second duty is a rather warmer one, if somewhat more tedious. For when you return from your morning ride, you have only time enough to eat a light lunch before turning to your office to put the administrative affairs of your estate in order. True, you've sworn your oath before the king and you have made yourself known to your tenants and neighbors, but that does not mean there are not other matters related to your assumption of the title which demand somewhat timely action. First, there are the letters to Grenadier Square and the Duke of Canaris in Fernandez Court, informing them of your new address so that your half pay might be routed properly. Then there are inquiries to the Intendancy regarding matters of law. You must look over your father's subscription to the city broadsheets so you may continue the ones you favor and cancel the ones you mislike. Perhaps most importantly of all, you send letters to the banking houses which hold your family's debt, settling the outstanding interest they are owed with a combination of the assets your father left behind and a portion of your own wealth. The third matter is the one which is perhaps most vital to the proper administration of your fief, the twice annual collection of rents, timed with the first planting season and the last harvest. Under normal circumstances, the rents would have been your only source of reliable income, and although your half-pay and royal annuity go some way to covering your expenses, only the rents levied upon your tenants can bring in enough money to keep your finances stable. Thankfully, this is a task which you have no need to be personally involved in. Instead, it is Sandersley who goes out every morning, armed with a copy of your ledgers, to visit the plots and cottages which your tenants have rented from you and exact the coin they owe you for the privilege. Every evening, he returns with the collected rents, bound for your strongbox, and a stack of receipts bound for your records. It is a task which Sandersley performs with his customary stolidness, a matter which gives you little trouble until the very last day, when your solicitor hurries into your study with a stack of folders under his arms and a worried expression on his face. My lord, I think we may have something of a problem, he reports as he places a thick sheaf of papers on your desk. I was presented with this not an hour ago. You look down to see a long list of names, almost all of them recognizable. They are names of your tenants printed in rough, unrefined hand. A handful of names are accompanied by signatures. Most carry on only an illiterate mark next to them. The list goes on for page after page until it seems as if every tenant in your fief has put ink to it. What is it? You ask. A petition, Sandersley replies. It demands that the rents be lowered for next spring and kept at that rate thereafter. Given the current hardships which they must endure, it may not be an unfair imposition. Your eyes narrow. Your tenants have every right to petition you, but your rents are your livelihood. It is not a matter on which you may concede ground easily. How much, you ask? Sandersley swallows hard. By a third, my lord. Yeah. So, I don't think I'm gonna do this this time around. I don't think I'm gonna raise the rent, but I don't think I'm going to go ahead and lower it because I don't have any money for real. Like I have, look at this, 2,118 crown. I have a debt of 16,000 crown. So, and my total net income the next 6 months is at 168. So it's basically nothing. I'm gonna need money. So now, granted, at the same time, I am going to need to turn around and try and figure out if I can. I need to see if I can negotiate getting the interest down, so maybe that'll help. But until I start getting some income, I ain't lowering this rent because I need money. So, yeah. Saints above, that is no small amount. No, my lord, it is not, Sandersley concedes. But given the circumstances, I have no doubt your tenants consider such a drastic reduction more than reasonable. Cutting rents by a tenth, perhaps, you muse, or even an eighth. But this? You shake your head in disbelief. Surely this year's harvest could not have been that bad, Sandersley grimaces. It is not a poor harvest which is the issue, my lord. It is the fact that nobody can afford to buy what is harvested. The towns have been just as badly pressed by the king's taxes as we have, and they do not have the coin to buy all the produce they once did. I think that the return of all the men who have went to Antar may have made things even worse. You nod pensively. As much as you might hate to admit it, Sandersley is likely right. With the tens of thousands of men who once made up the king's army in Antar returning home at the end of the war, there must be a surfeit of healthy men competing for what jobs exist in the towns and cities, a situation sure to drive wages down. It is a wretched thought that your fellow soldiers are only making the situation worse, but that doesn't mean that it might not very well be true. Your solicitor clears his throat quietly. Now then, about this petition. Your thoughts, Sandersley? You are still new to your seat, Lord, Sandersley ponders, and your tenants still do not know what quite to make of you. Acquiescing to their request may ease their anxieties. It may also ruin me, you point out. This feast's revenues are not so much greater than its expenses. If those revenues were to drop so precipitously, your solicitor nods. That is true. But here you have a chance to make an early impression on your tenants, he notes. Remember that they are not Antari serfs. If they are displeased, they may well leave. If they are happy, then they will stay, and their high opinion of you may even attract others. Their goodwill may prove to be a more valuable resource than coin. This is an opportunity to win a great deal of it. And how long will that goodwill last when you're forced to make economies to keep yourself afloat? When the tenants realize that lower rents mean no more money to repair the roads or fix up the cottages, will you still have their goodwill then, or will they simply think you a fool? Sandersley looks back down at the petition, then gives you a grim little smile. I think I have made my thoughts of the matter clear. Do you have a decision, my lord? Hmm. I mean, I definitely understand what he's saying, but like he said, like I was thinking, if I turn around and lower the rent, then I'm not going to have any money to even do the small basic things or whatever. So I even remember when I turned around and I was playing with my boosted save and I did a few of these little estate things just to see how it would kind of pan out and things like that. And even with a ridiculous amount of money, and I built up roads and stuff like that, and I lowered the rent, I still wasn't making any money. So, because I think there are certain things that kind of come to chance. I do think there are random events that happens, and you don't really have a kind of a say on how that goes. There are some that always happen. I think the one with the Antari serfs, that always happens. The one with the bandits, that always happens. But everything else is just a matter of chance. But yeah, even with a large amount of money, I still turned around and was losing money from from my estate. And it wasn't until I think it was almost the ass end of the game when I looked at the stats and I was just like, oh, I'm actually making money now. And even still, it was not that much. So I don't now there may be some other things that I can do in town well, in the capital that might help out, but there wasn't a whole lot of ways to make some money as far as the route that I took, because I took the route of being a loyalist to the king, and so on and so forth. So that turned around and pretty much led me on that path. But I don't know. Like, I don't know if I can actually afford to do that. I don't think I can turn around and do that. But we'll see how it goes. Times are hard for all. I cannot afford to lower rents anytime soon. Your tenants are not the only ones facing financial difficulty. You still have debts to pay off and expenses to manage. How could you possibly do so, let alone spend yet more money on the improvements and repairs, which your estate so desperately needs? If you're willing to reduce your income simply because some poor tenant with no horizon beyond the fences of his own plot wishes it, Sandersley evidently does not seem to see it the way you do. He gives you an uncertain look as he gathers up the petition. If that is your wish, my lord. However, it is, you reply briskly. Gather the tenants and make the announcement in the village square tomorrow. When Sandersley returns the next morning, he seems even less pleased. They do not like it, my lord, he reports. I believe some of them are even planning to leave. You shake your head. If they could only know that you are facing hardship no less worse than theirs. Still, to lose tenants cannot serve to improve matters, and in truth, it is still something which is difficult to wrap your head around. True, men had deserted in Antar, but they did not declare their intentions openly and walk off in broad daylight. At least they didn't in your regiment. To be faced with the fact your tenants might do so at any time, and indeed have every right to do so, remains a disconcerting principle. Only the fact that the departing families have already paid their rents for the coming season offers any real consolation. Perhaps new tenants will arrive to replace them before spring. And that's really all I can hope to do in this case, is hopefully I can build up some things around town and stuff like that before I leave, at least. I can hope to build up some things around town, and hopefully that'll help out. But even that's kind of screwy, because if it's still anything like the demo, you can only do one thing at a time. So it would be nice if, you had some options to turn around and do multiple things at one time. Like, I think it would be reasonable to turn around and let you do one thing for the village, one thing for your house. And, if you have the money to do it. If you don't have the money to do it, then you can't do it. I even remember one thing I really liked in another game. I can't remember the name of the game. I think there were two games in the series, and there was supposed to be a third. But it was a game where you played as a knight, and eventually you end up with your own fief, and you can end up. There's so many things that you can end up doing in that game. But one of the things that I liked about it, that they had an option in there where once you go back to you kind of manage your estate and things like that, you have I think it's two or three options, and there's a fourth option presented to you if you have a high intellect, or I think if you manage money appropriately, where you can do two projects at one time. And I like that because, again, I like the fact that
you were able to do multiple things at one time because of your intellect. Whereas I feel like in this case, you don't really have any benefits. You know, you would think that a smart person or a person that has a high intellect and that was in the military might be able to, you know, throw in some things that he learned in the process and maybe organize things a little bit better or call in some favors or something. I don't know. And that's another thing too. Like if you were able to be like, well, hey, you know, since I was, you know, this cavalry commander and stuff like that, and I was this war hero and so on and so forth. Maybe I could open up some type of area in my village or whatever that, you know, invites people to come in and help build up my fief and stuff like that. That would help out, which would give me more rent and so on and so forth. I would like a lot of options like that, but I don't think there's anything like that so far in the game. But little things like that. So I'm probably going to end up staying away from the estate as much as possible because it's a pain, honestly. With the rents collected, you finally have the time to turn your attention to more long-term matters. For generations, your family has prioritized the maintenance and diminution of your ancestral debt above any other fiscal concern. Though reasonable enough an occupation, you also know that such a preoccupation has had its cost. For years, much of your estate has been left neglected, with outbuildings and cottages left to decay, and vital improvements left unmade. Now, however, however, you have the power to change all that. Now that you are in full possession of your powers, it may well be time to reverse the slow decay of your buildings, of your holdings, and commit to some real improvements to the condition of your barony. Yet, even after an afternoon of looking over the reports and receipts regarding the condition of your fief and finances, you quickly come to the conclusion that you're really not sure how to go about it. The practice of managing an estate was a major part of your education, of course, but that was so many years ago. Now, all of the intelligence which you once accrued on the subject appears only as half forgotten memory. You might still attempt to press ahead regardless, but without some assurance that you've retained enough to make a competent go of it, things might turn out rather badly, but both for you and for the generations of your descendants to follow. Perhaps it would be wiser to ask Sandersley for a few reminders on the whole business. Yes, I think I shall ask Sandersley for some advice. It was your solicitor who maintained the estate during the time between your father's death and your return. Naturally, you have reason to suspect that he would be the best source of any counsel regarding its continued operation. Thankfully, it's not quite too late in the day to summon him to your study. When he arrives, it takes him only a glance at your desk to recognize precisely why you've called him to the house. One must understand, my lord, that there were certain matters regarding the estate over which I had no power. He reminds you when you confirm his first impression. As his solicitor, I served as the caretaker of your lord father's interests, nothing more. My brief was to maintain things as he had left them, and this was an authority I took especial pains not to exceed. I understand, you reply, nodding. But you were familiar with the functioning of the estate and its finances? Oh, yes, my lord. Of that you might be assured, Sandersley replies. I have knowledge enough regarding the estate and its current condition to advise you regarding most ordinary matters of administration, and if necessary, my understanding of the principles of estate management are at your disposal. Tell me about tenants and rents. Sure. My lord, Sandersley asked as if you just asked him for instructions on how to put on your own shoes. In all fairness, you've been away for a substantial period of time. Tenants and rent, Sandersley. Ah, well, yes. As I am sure you are aware, this is instructional stuff. This is just tutorial things about like how things work, etc. Loans and interest. Have your advice on improving the estate? Have you recommended for improving the estate's condition? Da 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 da. So actually, I won't get into this. I will just skip past all of this and make it look like I have really been interested in all this. But again, that's all that is. It's just tutorial stuff. So, nah. Sandersley nods. Very good, my lord, he says as he withdraws from your study, leaving you once again alone with your notes. It is too late now to get much business done. You call for supper and let the information that your solicitor has given you turn in your thoughts for a while before you at last go to bed. The next day, you return to your desk and begin the work of administering your fief in earnest. Okay, so now we're to the managing of the fief. So I think one of the things that I am going to do is I'm going to really kind of focus on the village itself proper. And like the first thing I want to do is I want to turn around and deal with the roads, because I think when I played the demo, there's one of the random events is that there can be some traders that want to come in, and it doesn't really work out because the roads were kind of jacked up. So yeah, that's something that I would like to do. um let's see about making my land more suitable for farming. I'll not have my tenants living in such dilapidated cottages. The school would be wisest. Now, some of these new ones, I mean, some of these things right here, I don't think I'll do these. The school will be the wisest investment, because that's the thing. Like, I can see the benefit of investments and stuff like that, but the thing about investments is that it's going to take a long time, and since I don't know how long this series is going to be, again, how many years ago did Guns of Infinity turn around and come out? And now Lords of Infinity just came out. And I guess the next one, Wars of Infinity, is going to, come out in a few years or something like that. So, that's an investment down the road, and it may not even pan out then. So, I don't think I'm going to turn around and worry too much about certain investments like this, because I will assume that I'll be able to do some of those in my later playthroughs or whatnot, but I'm not sure. But let's see. I guess I will go to. Should I do farming, cottages, or the road? I really think the road would be helpful though. So yeah, let's do the road first. You make a note to set aside the appropriate funds, then draft a call for a workman to be posted in the village square. The winter snows will make it impossible to begin work until the beginning of spring, but by then you should have everything in readiness to start construction in earnest. Until then, all you can do is wait. Okay, and see, you can only do one thing. So, again, that's kind of I really don't like that. So, especially in this particular case, because all I'm doing is planning in this particular case. So, I would have liked to have been able to turn around and do, again, one for the village and one for that. And, if the option, if you really wanted to, then, have all three of them there. You can only do one of each, of course. But to have all these options in only one, it's always that's the pet peeve that I have about a lot of choice of games, is that sometimes choice of games put a lot of choices in there, which some matter, some don't. They may matter in their own flavorful way. They may not matter in their own way, in another way. But sometimes I feel like that can be a burden. But sometimes when you have so many choices, it can be a detriment. And, again, to each his own. I mean to attend to the matter of my family's debt. I do. So I'm not going to actually pay on any of the debt, but I do want to try and negotiate some of this, renegotiate the interest on my loans. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it, because I think this is one of those stats that relies on charm as opposed to intellect or anything like that. And I would hope that intellect would play some factor, because understanding laws and stuff like that, and that's not a charming thing, that's an intellect thing. But I'm not going to hold my breath. So let's try to renegotiate the interest on my loans. You write up a letter to your bankers requesting a lowering of the interest rate on your debt. You promise all sorts of guarantees regarding future repayment and attach references to any friend or ally who might possibly be able to speak in favor of your character, your integrity, and the stability of your finances. It's a risky proposition, especially given the prodigious size of your family's existing debts. It's hard enough a business to convince a banking house to give up on some of their potential revenue. Harder still when the scale of your obligation makes for so much of it. You send the letter off. Now all you can do is wait for the reply. I think another thing I might recommend too is that the the amount of debt. My God, like that's a lot of debt. That is a whole heap of debt and then some. So that just seems like a ridiculous amount. Like I understand you can have some debt. I think maybe half of that would have been good, maybe 8,000. But because I don't know how many cases of I don't know how much money you can really make in Lords of Infinity. I mean, not in Lords of Infinity, but in Sabers of Infinity and Guns of Infinity. I think that the ransom for the queen, not the queen, but the princess, is quite high. But I think that's like the only real big one. I think there's some other ones in there, but it kind of gets negated by you may or may not having to spend that money at other points and stuff like that. But yeah, like that's a ridiculous amount of debt. It is not long after the autumn gives way to the first frost of winter, the muddy roads freeze solid into uneven, pitted tracks before being buried entirely under the first fall of snow. The tenants of your fief shutter their windows and stay within their cottages, leaving only the rising pillars of smoke from their chimneys as a sign of their existence. You too are shut up indoors. With your immediately pressing business dealt with, you suddenly find yourself with nothing to do, being isolated entirely from news of the outside world by the snowed-in roads. True, Antar had much harsher winters, but in Antar, you had the society of your fellow soldiers. Even in that first winter, in that wretched little outpost by the River Cairn, there had been your dragoons and half a company of grenadiers, along with Lord Wolfswood, who was merry enough for 10 men. Here, there are only your servants, your mother, and your increasingly grating siblings to liven your short, bleak days and your long, equally bleak nights. Week after week, it is the same endless monotony in a house that's beginning to feel more and more like a dilapidated, draughty prison. You must do something, anything, or else you fear that you may go mad. I could try to get acquainted with my brothers and sisters. I can call upon Lady Julia to get to know her better, weather permitting, of course. So yeah, let's talk to Lady Julia. I don't know. Well, I don't think there's actual personal stats in this game. There are days when the snow doesn't fall so heavily and the roads are clear enough to allow a coach to make the journey to Benivera's estate. It is on those days that you wrap yourself in an overcoat and call upon Lady Julia at her father's house. Next to the roaring fire, the two of you spend long hours in animated conversation, though it quickly becomes clear that your respective educations have given you little expertise in common. However, instead of alienating you from each other, your differences only bring you closer together as you speak of politics, history, and natural philosophy to her while she tutors you in the finer points of cookery, fashion, and estate management. With every return visit, she grows warmer and warmer. You begin to gain a respect not only for her knowledge in topics which you know little, but also her kind nature, her earnest manner, and the sharp wit which you at times manage to coax out from behind her natural reticence. The former you had almost expected as a matter of course, for such things are drilled into the heads of young ladies of the blood early. But the sparkling light of her intelligence comes as a surprise at first, then a gentle, happy assurance thereafter. When it is last time for you to leave, you cannot help but return home feeling as if your mind has been sharpened like a blade against a whetstone. Oh God, I saw, unfortunately. So that didn't really help my stats at all, but we'll see. Unfortunately, it is a feeling which does not last. For every day that the weather allows you to call upon Lady Julia, there are long gray weeks in which the roads are choked with snow and ice, and you have no recourse but to remain confined indoors, sustaining yourself only on the memory of your last visit and the anticipation of your next. Starved of stimulating conversation and the open spaces of the outdoors, you quickly begin to feel less like lord of your manor and more like a prisoner within it, your body growing languid and slack for lack of activity, your thoughts whirring with nothing to concentrate them on. At times, you find yourself pacing nervously up and down the halls or simply staring out the window, watching the snow fall and listening to the window panes rattle from the cold wind. Spring comes as a long sigh of relief, warm southern winds whirring away the snow to reveal a vast stretch of bare branches, dead grass, and gray slush. Streams swell into raging torrents, fed by snow melts, and the interminable spring rain, and the roads thaw into impassable tracts of mud. Yet even so, signs of life issue from outside your window. The village of Roomberg comes alive as the last of the snow melts, the first hardy tenants stepping into the torrential downpour to prepare their plots for spring planting, their tiny forms swaddled in heavy coats to ward off the retreating chill. So it comes as something of a surprise when your valet interrupts at dinner one rainy day to inform you that a foreign gentleman is in the parlor, awaiting your convenience. At first glance, the fellow looks like no gentleman at all. With his back turned, you can only see the sodden mass of a sailor's shabby oilskin coat hanging off his burly frame. It is only when you step closer that you pick out the hilt of a saber and the long fur-lined jacket of an Antari nobleman underneath. He turns as you approach his blonde hair. As you approach, his blonde hair and long mustachio hanging in sodden strings under sharp blue eyes. Why, saints above, it is Lord Carroll, you exclaim. Lord Carroll of Locke. What an unexpected pleasure it is to see you here. Okay. I really don't remember. I think, yeah, he was the guy that we captured in the second book, I think. Possibly. Yeah, it might have been the second book. It is just Carol now, I fear. The Antari observes ruefully as he shrugs off the rain-slicked mass of his overcoat and hands it off to your valet. Prince Corabir took possession of my estate and titles not long after he returned north. Locke may still be the home of my birth, but I am no longer lord of it. You nod in sympathy. The Antari nobleman, former nobleman now, you suppose, had warned you that his hard and capricious liege would do as much when you last spoke. Still, it must be something of a blow for him to have lost the lands which his family had ruled over for likely centuries, not to mention his status and position as a lord of the League Congress. It is strange, perhaps, to feel so greatly for a man who was once your enemy, a man whose fall had much to do with his defeats against the very army in which you served for more than a decade. Yet even as an enemy, you never knew Carol of Locke to be anything less than a man of honor. Perhaps it is only natural that you should feel sympathy for the disgrace of so noble a fellow. I must apologize for my condition, Locke continues, grimacing at the small puddle around his feet. I'm not quite used to your Tierran weather. I expected the roads to be frozen for a month yet when I departed. Let's see. Should I say what has brought you all the way out here, or I'll just say, well, I'll be nice. We must get you into some dry clothes then. I fear I have none to change into, he replies regretfully. Even my armor has been sold to pay for my ransom. The war left me with precious little, barely enough to leave Antar behind. So you came here, you ask? Locke nods. Thought I said Loch-ness. I wish to see this country of yours for myself, to understand your people and to learn from you. He gives you a wan smile. In our arrogance, we thought ourselves better than you once. If it was the will of the saints and the mother to humble us, then it must have been here for a reason, yes? It is an answer, but not the answer you were looking for. But why here? Surely you can learn more of Tierra from Artoria or Fernandad's court than a tour of an estate in the middle of the country. The Antari shrugs. Another might, perhaps, but I spent the winter in Artoria, and all I got was a reminder that I am not a man well suited for cities. They're too noisy to think in. I recalled our conversation when we last met and remembered that you possess an estate out in the wilderness. I hoped, he takes a breath as he regathers his thoughts. I'm no longer welcome in my country, and the ways of yours are still quite strange to me. I would like some time in a quiet place to think about what I am to do next. I was hoping, perhaps, you would be most welcome to stay here a while. Locke says nothing for a moment. Perhaps he had not expected you to say yes. I thank you, and I apologize for imposing upon you, he replies. I came here upon a mule, a wretched creature, but one which has acted faithfully enough and deserves better than to be left in the rain. You catch his meaning immediately. For all your differences in country and tradition, he is still, some part of him, a cavalryman, one who thinks of his mount more readily than he thinks of himself. I shall have him put in the stables immediately, if you are interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching from the dining room. Darren, will you not come back to dinner? We have been waiting. Your mother is cut off mid sentence and mid stride by the sight she beholds. You still still in your morning suit and the sodden giant of a man opposite you. Darren, she asked with no small amount of trepidation, who might this be? Mother, you begin. May I introduce Carol of Locke, late of the army of Prince Corbeard. You turn back. Locke, this is my lady mother. Locke steps forward, closing the distance in 3 great strides. With a single fluid motion, he drops into an effortless bow. I apologize, great lady, for the abruptness of my appearance and for the state of disarray in which I have left your parlor, but I must say that it is an honor to make your acquaintance. Your mother's cheeks color just a little. You are a friend of my son's, I trust. Locke's eyes flick to you for a moment. War once made us enemies, he explains, but I am happy to say that peace now makes us friends, my lady. I have agreed to allow Master Locke to stay with us for a few weeks, you add. I trust this is acceptable. Quite, she replies warmly, and I am gratified to see my son has such fine taste in companions. She gives a broad grin before turning back to Locke. Now we must get you into some dry clothes, and I'm sure you must be hungry. There's still some left over, perhaps. The following weeks passed rather more pleasantly with Locke's presence. Though the former hussars spends much of his time in reflection, he proves a not unpleasant conversationalist when coaxed out of his brooding temper. More than once, he regales the dining table with folk tales and heroic recountings passed down to him from his father. And although his imperfect grasp of Tierran language renders certain translations less than perfect, they are fine stories all the same. You also notice that he's been spending a great deal of time with your sister, either in idle conversation or in long walks on the grounds on the few days when the weather permits it. Lady Louisa has a bright smile, he says when you bring up the subject one day, as he's feeding his mule. More than that, she is, I do not know the words in your language, one who knows what she wants and is willing to take great measures to get it. His eyes take on a distant, almost wistful look. She reminds me a great deal of my own sisters in Antar. I did not think I would meet another here in this distant country. Honestly, my guy, I didn't even know my sister's name, so you know more than I know. My sister can be quite difficult at times. She has a strong will, Locke observes, one which causes her to fight for what she believes in, which would be all well and good were not what she believes in contrived to be directly contrary to whatever my opinion is, you reply sourly. Whenever I state an opinion on a matter, she chooses the opposite. I think she engages in such behaviors solely for the purpose of provoking an argument. Locke shrugs. So don't argue, he offers. Let her win. Let her. You catch yourself before your voice can exceed the bounds of polite conversation. I am simply to lay supine as she rolls over me like a flood tide. Your sister argues with you because she thinks you act for your benefit and not hers, Locke explains. Show you are willing to act on her opinion sometimes, and you will help show her you are willing to work with her when she has a good idea, and that you are not her enemy. Maybe Locke has a point. Perhaps you ought to be more yielding in the future, especially in matters where your sister might have some expertise. Locke, on the other hand, seems to simply be satisfied that you're thinking about it. Oh, well, again, I don't really know anything about her. My sister is still unmarried. Locke catches your meaning immediately. No, he replies flatly, shaking his head. Even if I were not almost twice her age, I could not even think of such a thing. Given our position, such a match would be impossible. You are a gentleman of the blood, you point out. You are a man of honor, a seasoned leader of men, and one with no small experience in the running of an estate. I have no incomes, no office, no fiefs, he replies despondently. I own only a mule and a saber, and a disgrace which will not be washed clean. It is only in stories that such men may win the hand of the fair lady. In real life, he sighs and shakes his head again, your sister is a lovely girl. She deserves someone who can care for her. who will make her happy. I think we can both see that. Locke offers you a pained smile, but it's clear he wishes to discuss this topic no more. And what of my brother? Have you spoken much with him? I have not, Locke replies. He seems to me more a man who listens than one who speaks. In truth, I have not spoken with him much since I returned, you admit. He was never one for talking, and I do not think that has greatly changed. Locke nods. Sometimes I think we are in much need of such men. If the League were possessed of more such fellows, perhaps it would not be in the predicament it is in. How do you mean? Locke thinks on your question for a moment. In your courts, matters are decided by simple majority. If those who are for outnumber those who are against, a motion passes. Yes? Yes, that's correct, you reply. Not quite sure where the Antari is going with this. If one man has formed an opinion without understanding the matter and votes ignorantly, then he cannot sway the whole of the chamber. Only if 20 or 50 such men are so do matters threaten to end with disaster. You nod. That seems accurate enough to you. In the League Congress, it only takes one vote to end a motion, Locke continues. All a lord of the Congress must do is stand and shout, I object, and the matter is ended. Did you know this? You do. The so-called free veto, you reply. I'm aware of it. Then you must be aware how a single ignorant man might make effective government impossible, Locke replies sourly. Had Antar been able to act as one, it would have been able to win the war with ease. Against your 50,000 soldiers, we could have sent 500,000. Instead, the Congress proved full of men who were more content to hear themselves shout than to let themselves think, and that left us divided and weak. Are you saying that if you had more men like my brother, Antar would have won the war, you ask? Locke shrugs. Perhaps, or perhaps we would not have gone to war with you at all. That's an interesting thought. I mean, I guess to a certain degree, our government is more like the United Kingdom. But I do think that there are certain aspects in our government where you can, I think as a senator, you can vote, well, you can kind of force a motion or you can add certain things to a bill. Because I think that's what happens a lot of times with certain bills where a senator has the right to either object to something, and then if they object, then it has to be debated. I think in most cases it's not a problem, but I do think in certain cases they can do little things that basically jacks up a bill or they'll put things in a bill knowing that it won't pass, and then the whole thing is gone and all that work is pretty much for naught. So yeah, I think we are a little bit closer to the unified kingdoms, but that doesn't mean that it's that much better. It still has a lot of problems. I guess in this instance it is, because honestly, what the League Congress has is just, that sounds like complete nonsense. If we had this in the United States, we already get absolutely fuck all done. We definitely wouldn't get anything done with that. Let's see. What of your own sisters? Where are they now? My sisters found themselves husbands when I was still in Prince Corobit's favor, Locke replies. They have estates and children of their own now. And your mother, you ask, is she well? Locke nods. She lives as far as I know. The letter which informed me that I was to be stripped of my titles and estates promised that she would be treated well, so long as I did not take up arms against the house of Corobit. So she's being held hostage to ensure that Locke doesn't betray his former master. A prudent blackmail, perhaps, but blackmail nonetheless. You've not written them, you ask? The Antari shakes his head. How could I? They deserve the right not to share their lives with my failures. No, they can pretend that I never existed. He sighs. It is better this way. Oh, that's sad. I'll have to go back inside. There's one more thing, Locke says before you can step away. Something which worries me a great deal. He eyes the crumbling ruins of your manor's stone fence warily. I've seen the condition of your walls. Forgive me for saying so, but they are in a dreadful state, open to attack from every direction. I think it would be unwise to leave them in such a way. It is not a wall exactly, you reply, but a fence. Locke frowns. It is a structure built to keep intruders out. The words may be different, but the meaning is still the same. The former hussar takes another look at the broken stone. In Antar, even the smallest and poorest estate would be kept inside a wall of logs, 1.5 times the height of a man at least. Is that what you suggest? You ask with more than a little skepticism. However, things are in Antar, here, high walls are more for the sake of privacy than security. Granted, they will keep out the occasional thief or vandal, but to see one's seat as a fortress, as Locke seems to do, cannot but smack of at least a little paranoia. A man can have wealth, influence, and high birth, and all of it will mean nothing if he cannot provide safety for himself and his family, Locke replies. That is a lesson we learned very young in Antar. Uh, it is something to consider, at least. I'll think about it. Then think quickly, Locke replies, a sudden tautness in his voice. Think quickly and act. It will cost no small sum to repair the fence, you point out, to reinforce it and to raise it to the height you would wish it would cost even more. That money could be better spent on other things. The Antari gives you a grim look. Could it? He asks. Fortifications can seem like a needless expense until the day that you need them. Surely that day is not due anytime soon, you reply incredulously. Does Locke really think that you'll wake up tomorrow morning to find some marauding armed band charging up the hillside? He shakes his head. Perhaps not, he replies darkly. But the Saints have a way of making a mockery of our expectations. Yeah, that is exactly what happened. The next day yields no sudden improbable attack by armed intruders, yet Locke's opinion remains unchanged, even as each new day brings with it only more rain and more mud. Then, even the rains begin to relent, and for the first time in what seems like half an eternity, the uniform gray certainty above gives way to the first rays of the sun. Week after week, the days grow longer and warmer. The creeks recede behind their banks, and the roads become firm once again. The village below slowly shrugs off the last of its winter torpor, until one day a vast profusion of men, women, wagons, and draught animals erupt from the hitherto closed barns and cottages, mostly headed out to the fields for the first day of planting. Yet a small group peel off from the procession, heading not for the fields but north for the high road, their carts piled high with boxes and bundles, leaving their cottages as empty shells behind them. Not long after, Sandersley reports to you with the statements of nearly half a dozen of your former tenants, each declaring your insistence on rents they cannot hope to continue paying as the reason for their departure. Perhaps you should have lowered the rents as your tenants had petitioned. Perhaps you might still do so, if only to stop any more tenants from leaving next season. As for the ones heading for the road now, they're already beyond your reach, bound for some other fief or one of the cities, or perhaps even to Kar, where they might work for pay far beyond what they could earn in Tierra, as long as they have the skills and the patience to serve as menial for the proud elves. In any case, they're far out of your reach now. There's no point in thinking about them anymore. I have heard of the trouble you have had with these serfs, Locke remarks, as the two of you watch your former tenants take their leave. I'm told that they made certain demands from you, and that they are leaving because you refuse to accept them. He gives you a worried glance. Is this true? Firstly, they are tenants, not serfs, you reply gently. And secondly, it is true. They petitioned me to lower their rents, and are leaving now because I refuse to do so. Locke's customarily pacific face twists into something remarkably like a scowl. In Antar, we would not accept such arrogance from our serfs. For one of no birth to impose himself upon a Bane-blooded master would be insolence of the highest degree. He would be lucky to escape with less than half a dozen strokes of great knot for his offense. You have seen the device which Locke speaks of during your time in Antar, a whip of hardened leather as long as a man is tall, more an instrument of torture or execution than of discipline. You cannot help but feel a shiver of revulsion at the thought of using such a terrible implement, one which makes the scourge used by the Navy and the regiments of foot look like a mere string by comparison. You must remember, sir, that this is not Antar, you reply. My tenants are not serfs. They have the right to petition, to make demands, as you put it. If those demands are not met, then they have the right to leave. The Antari frowns. So in truth, it is they who give you orders. He shakes his head. Forgive me, I find this quite confusing. You provide the land they work and the cottages they live in, but still it is they who dictate terms. You take on all the risk and gain nothing from it but the rent they pay. And even then, and even that is only because they wish to pay it to you. How is it fair that you, the Lord, have so little power, and they, the rabble, have so much? Uh, uh, I could say you were right. The commons are in much want of discipline. Um, I have more power than one might think. It is merely more subtle in nature. Subtle, Locke asked. Perhaps, for I do not think I can see it. To me, it seems as if it is your serfs, your tenants, who have all the power. They have freedom, which is not quite the same thing, you reply. They have the right to move where they please, but that doesn't mean they may simply demand a plot to till and cottage to live in. Only those who can afford to abandon their livelihoods can afford to leave. As for the rest, they are as beholden to me by threats of destitution and starvation as an Antari serf is to his master by threat of the knot. The former Hussar frowns. In Antar, we would not think of it in such a way. We are not in Antar, you simply reply. No, Locke says, letting out a resigned sigh. I suppose we're not. That afternoon, a courier arrives wearing the blue coat of the intendancy, riding hard at the gallop. He stays only long enough to drop off a parcel containing 6 months' half pay, your annuity from the king, back issue of the Atoria Gazette, and a letter from a sender you haven't had word of in years. The Dowager Viscountess Wolfswood. My Lord Rumberg, one is obliged to offer the expression of utmost relief to hear that the saints have preserved you from the perils of the war, now most happily concluded, and to receive word that you have safely returned to your own seat. Likewise, one must also send her condolences for the loss of his lordship's father, and offer congratulations as to his own assumption of the seat. Unfortunately, matters have not progressed greatly over the past few years regarding the matter which you have so graciously offered his lordship's support to. Despite the friendly replies of so many of the army officers, there has been little support for such a cause at home, at least until recently. It is much to one's satisfaction to relate that a number of very powerful figures have lately expressed interest in the cause of my son's elevation. We are organizing now in the capital to secure the necessary support to bring matters to a satisfactory conclusion. If it is at all convenient to his lordship, one would implore him to join us. One hopes that one might place her trust in his lordship as one's son once did. In hope and friendship, Frederica the All-Hunter, Dowager Viscountess Wolfswood. So it seems that the effort to raise your old commanding officer to sainthood is progressing apace after all. Indeed, it seems to be going quite smoothly. If the dowager's new allies are as powerful as she seems to imply, it may only be a matter of a few years more before the man you once knew as Colonel Hunter could be raised to that most exalted of memories, that of a sainted martyr of a pantheon of the Red, with all the attendant honors and an order of knighthood sworn to uphold the example of his martyrdom. Of course, if you intend to play any part in that going forward, then it appears you will have to go to the capital to do it. And given the sort of news which the Gazette brings from Atoria, the capital is hardly a tranquil place. The other letter you get allows for not ambiguity about that. You need only see the seal of the House of Wells on the wax to know who sent it. My dear Lord Rumberg, I ought to first of all offer my congratulations as to you assuming your house title. One must admit a certain degree of envy in the manner which a male heir may so easily take up his power and privileges upon inheritance, but one must also suppose that such a thing can only partially make up for the state of unemployment which circumstances have rendered upon you, which I am sure he possessed. While I'm sure he possessed his reasons, I cannot say I approve of the manner in which his grace opted to retire so capable and veteran an officer from active service, for he has not only deprived you of the profession in which you so involved yourself these last years, but also his regiment, his army, his kingdom of an able and experienced leader of men. In this matter, however, one may recommend a particular course of remedy. Having read the report which I have composed regarding the conduct of the army in Antar, His Majesty has declared the intention of empowering a royal commission for the sake of reforming the army, so that we shall not need to pay tuition to relearn the lessons we so painfully acquired in the late war. I've been offered a place on the commission, which I plan to accept, as have several other officers of whom you may be aware. Given your own experience, I believe that you would be well suited for a seat on this commission, and may exert some effort to ensure that your application may be favorably regarded should you present yourself in Atoria. The fact that you are now in possession of a court seat can only work in your favor, for the Duke of Wolfram and his supporters have made themselves implacable enemies of the commission's object, as well as almost every other aspect of the king's policy. All winter they have spoken of ending the war taxes and reducing the size of the army to pay for it, and their calls grow more strident by the day. It is even said that they will attempt to present their own budget when the courts open this year, in direct contravention contravention of all established traditions. Jesus Christ. Needless to say, the army needs every defender it can muster in the chamber, and I can think of few others as well equipped to play such a role as you. As for myself, I must travel to the capital myself this year to confer with the Duke of Warburton regarding the matter of my estate. The young fellow is quite charming, but thoroughly debauched, and I would be most pleased to have the company of a more robust sort of gentleman in the city, should such a prospect serve your interests. I shall hope to see you soon. Until then, I remain your obedient servant, Eleonora, Countess Wales. When you had spoken in Antar, Countess Wales often mentioned her desire to reform the king's army into a more effective fighting force, one which wouldn't allow the mistakes that led to the Battle of Blogia, where her father died at the head of his regiment. That the king has evidently called for a commission to study such a possibility must have come as good news to her. Yet such an endeavor seems already imperiled. You have little doubt that at least one of her reasons for writing you must be to convince you to take up the seat in the courts, where you might use your position to defend the commission she seems so anxious for the survival of. Indeed, you cannot help but consider it. Yet even so, surely you're more needed here. With Tierra at peace, the reform of the army can wait. True, the refurbishment and administration of your estate and the affairs of your household could be handled by a manager appointed for the task if you were to depart for Atoria, but they would be nowhere near as effective as you would be were you to take a direct lead. And there's a matter of cost, too. A permanent presence in Atoria would mean a townhouse and a whole new set of servants, hardly a trivial cost. Surely it would be more responsible for you to remain here on your estate rather than head to the capital for the sake of a political fight you may not even be able to influence, right? Oh man, this is such a hard decision. The realm needs me. I must go to Atoria and make my voice heard. Yeah, because I want no part of these lands. Somebody can have it. True, your estate may need your steady hand to prosper. True, it bodes ill to leave your business unfinished here. Yet some things are bigger than one man, one estate, one poor barony far from the halls of power. Tierra is in a time of crisis, and in such a time, it is your obligation to do what you can to preserve its institutions, its security, and its liberties. The oath you swore before the king and the courts binds you to it. Your honor compels you to it. You are a lord of the courts. Your duty is to the unified kingdom first, and to your own interests second. That is not a duty you mean to shirk. You fold up your copy of the Gazette and call your family and staff. You have an announcement to make. You are heading back to Atoria. Chapter 3, or Chapter 2, good lord, wherein the Lord of the Courts returns to the city of Atoria and establishes himself therein. All right, so we've gone a little bit over an hour right now as far as recording. I will do a little bit more for this one, and then in the next video, we will in earnest start getting into new content because, again, we haven't really seen these parts. We haven't even seen this part, actually, if I'm not mistaken. The process of announcing your decision is a simple enough affair. You gather everyone who might need to know in the Great Hall and inform them that in a week's time you will be heading back to Atoria. Nobody objects. After all, you are Lord Roomberg and head of your house. Who is anyone to question how you exercise your prerogatives? Yet a rather thornier question remains. Who is to replace you? Not as Baron Roomberg, of course, but as the senior administrator of your fief. With you in the capital, the day-to-day responsibilities of actually running your estate will have to fall to another, and it will be their temperament and decisions which are likely to decide just how your lands are to develop, if they are to develop at all. Sandersley is perhaps an obvious choice. He acted in the capacity of estate manager in the years after your father's death. You cannot say that he's done particularly poorly, but that doesn't mean you don't have some reservations. For all of his education and experience in matters of law, Sandersley is still baneless. While it isn't unusual for a commoner of sufficient learning to manage a noble estate, and while his low birth may not impact his ability to tally sums and keep records, you cannot doubt that without a Baneblood's natural affinity for command, he may prove to be a poor man in the case of a major crisis. Your brother is the other obvious choice. As both your blood sibling and your current heir, he's almost made for the role. You can only hope that the guidance of your mother and sister serve to counterbalance your brother's shortcomings. In truth, given your brother's rather accommodating tendencies, it might be more accurate to say that it is the woman of your family who, for good or ill, will be making the real decisions, or the women of your family. With your brother as a cipher so that the more hidebound elements of society are not over horrified by the idea of a baron's authority being openly wielded by two women. There's also Lady Julia and her family to consider. Your departure for Atoria so soon after the confirmation of your engagement might seem to them like the act of a man about to renege on his promises. In such a case, appointing one of your fiance's younger brothers to the management of your estate will certainly serve as an appropriate sign of commitment, though you cannot answer as to the competencies of either Baron Benivera's sons. It would at least reassure and strengthen your mutual alliance. And there's another option. Carol of Locke may be new to your country, but he's still a gentleman of the blood and a man who once held a fief of his own. Despite his occasional difficulty in coming to terms with Sierra's traditions and laws, you know him to be diligent, conscientious, honest, and most importantly, in desperate want of employment. He would certainly not be the conventional choice, but when it comes to experience in the administration of a landed estate, you will likely find no one better. So, yeah, these are my options. I am not going to pick Sandersley because I feel like while I get Sandersley Hole's deal, I'm pretty sure he's probably the best choice as far as if you don't really have any other options, because he's at least going to keep the state or at least kind of maintain it. He's probably not going to do anything or anything like that. But at the same time, this estate is in a dilapidated estate. Or a dilapidated state. So I kind of need somebody who has some experience. So I am going to pick Locke as my estate manager. I do like the idea of Lord Benivera, one of his sons, taking over. But at the same time, I'm kind of feeling like I'm giving too much, power to Lord Benivera in this particular case. And I think for now, with the choices that I've made as far as the marriage and things like that, it shouldn't be too bad. I don't think I'm going to have too many problems with that. And then, of course, my brother, there's no way in hell I would let my brother do it because I feel like he's not the type to be able to run things, especially when I look at like the whole bandit thing that's going to come up. I couldn't imagine him turning around and dealing with that situation. He would probably just let us all get killed. So, Locke, you will be the estate manager. A dragoon on a dun, and a Cossack on... I didn't get to read the rest of it. Locke meets your decision with a tight-jawed apprehension. You are certain, he asks quietly, the moment he's able to speak with you in private. When you assure him that you mean the appointment in earnest, his shoulders sag in relief. The job is one far below the station of such a fellow, and its income of 50 crown a year is likely only a pittance compared to the value of the estate he left behind in Nantar, but it's meaningful employment, and it does provide an income, and to Locke, that seems to be all that matters. I'm not in my country, he replies determinedly, but I will do my best to ensure that it prospers as if it were. The next week passes in a whirlwind of activity as you pack and prepare for your voyage. You must not only stow away the provisions and amenities which you need for the journey, but also all the clothes, documents, and other implements which you might need in the capital. Beyond that, there's also the matter of ensuring your domestics know their business, briefing your new estate manager on the current state of your lands, and otherwise preparing the estate for your extended absence. You barely have enough time to write Lady Julia a letter of farewell. Then, at long last, your coach is piled high with boxes and bags as you climb aboard, and set off on your long trip to Crittenden and then Atoria. Your staff meets your departure with stony faces. When you pass the market square of Roomberg Village, a small crowd forms to see you off. Though whether you're there celebrating your presence or merely your departure, you cannot know. But there's little you can do about such matters now, short of turning yourself around and returning home. You force yourself to think not of what you're leaving behind, but to the long road ahead. You begin your journey with no small amount of apprehension. If the reports in the Gazette are to be believed, then the country's roads are not as safe as they were in your youth, or even as safe as they were last autumn. Rumors abound of roadsmen, folk driven by poverty and desperation to robbing travelers on the roads. With only your coachman for company, you travel with a brace of pistols and your saber close at hand, along with your rune gun set upon your lap. You keep a careful eye on your surroundings as you set off into the wilderness, watching with a practiced eye for any potential ambush as you keep your weapons at the ready. Once or twice, you see the already decaying remnants of men hanging from the trees, placards around their stretched and rope-bound necks, declaring their crimes to all who pass. Yet, you know that for every roadsman caught, there could be another dozen still prowling through the trees. You do not slacken in your vigil, at least not at first. It is easy in the beginning to keep your pistols cocked and loaded and to watch the road ahead, but as the day passes, it becomes more and more of an effort to keep your attention. The task, at first so similar to the familiar obligation of keeping watch over a cavalry patrol, soon devolves into an increasingly onerous reminder as to why, in particular, sentries are rarely expected to stand watch for longer than 8 hours at a time, day after day, from the minute you set out to the minute you arrive at the next coach house or traveler's inn. You keep watch as best you can. But as the journey continues, you find yourself physically compelled to look away and rest your eyes, if only for a few minutes. So naturally, it is during one of these moments of respite that you suddenly find your coach jerking to a stop. Your nerves frayed and your mind exhausted, you barely even register the change before the door of your carriage is pulled open to reveal a stout, unshaven man with the ragged remnants of a burnt orange coat around his shoulders, and a pistol aimed at your face. Great. Can't avoid this either way. He's not alone. You see the shapes of two other similarly dressed men standing in the brush, one of them with a long infantry musket in his hands, pointed at your coachman. You've no doubt that there's another covering your coach from the other side of the road. At least that's what you would do. Their weapons are steady in their hands. These men are no amateurs, at least when it comes to this sort of work. My deepest apologies, my lord, their leader says, his rough accented voice deferential to the point of mockery. I regret to inform you that there is now a toll for passage along this road. You reply with a cold stare. If he thinks you are to be intimidated by this little farce, then he's quite mistaken. You've had pistols pointed at your face before. For a moment, the roadsman only returns a blank, somewhat bemused stare. Evidently, he's used to accosting a rather different sort of traveler along the roads. If only for a moment, he seems not quite sure what to do. It is a small victory, but you don't allow yourself to get lost in self-congratulation. For all of his momentary confusion, your attacker's hands hold steady, and his eyes are sharp and hard. One squeeze of his finger, and all the small victories in creation will mean damn little. Look, my lord, I ain't want to make this difficult. Your assailant finally says, made at last to speak plain. You step outside, we take your coin, and then we send you on your merry way, unharmed. It would take longer than a few minutes. It won't take longer than a few minutes. Trust me. He nudges his chin at the pistol still pointed squarely betwixt your eyes. It will be far less unpleasant than the alternative. What do you say, my lord? Oh boy. So I don't have a lot of options right here, because my soldiering stat is piss poor. Yeah, it's a 48. My charisma is a 48 too. I'm fairly certain if I try any of these other things that this isn't going to work. Let me try and see if I can talk them down. You meet the roadsman's gaze with a hard, steady look of your own. Is this really how you mean to spend the rest of your life, you ask? Your would-be assailant falters for the briefest of moments. What? The word comes out almost unbidden. The life you've chosen. You must know what comes of it, you reply. They will catch you, you know. It is only a matter of time. If you're clever, you may perhaps last a summer. If you are truly talented, you may even survive a year. But eventually, you'll make a mistake, and they will catch you. You keep your words cold, matter of fact, as if you were describing the setting of the sun. You and all your companions will spend the rest of your days as outlaws, banished from society and civilization, and at the end of it, you will hang. Is that what you want? The roadsman's eyes narrows. You talk as if I chose this, he growls, teeth grit. His pistol hand is shaking with anger, but he's speaking to you. That's a start. Why not honest work? You ask, doing your best to keep your eyes off the muzzle of the pistol still pointed at you. You seem fit, young enough for hard labor. Surely even laying brick is better than this. Honest work? Let me tell you what I know of honest work, my lord, he snarls, his fury twisting his words into simmering vitriol. For 8 years I fought as a soldier in Antar. I lost my brother at Blogia. My sister's husband shat his guts out on the march to Solokovo. A cannonball cut my best friend in two at Caringia. I spent 8 bloody years baking in summer, shivering in winter, and with naught to eat most time except wormy biscuits and rationed beef hard enough to shingle a temple roof with. I did it because I believed home was the place worth fighting for, and I kept believing it until I got home and my officer sent me away without even a thank you. Until I had lodging houses close their doors to me because of my uniform, until men chased me out of the village with dogs because they didn't want a soldier to steal their jobs. The whole of his body is trembling now with a burning, desperate fury, his voice growing higher and more ragged with every word. So you tell me, my lord, he all but screams, what choice do I have? You could choose to work for me? The roadsman's eyes go wide as he all but reels back. What? He manages barely. I have an estate just a few days' travel from here, you reply. My household could use men already used to carrying arms and taking orders. If it's honest work you're looking for, I can see that a place is provided for you. This time, he does take a step backwards, his mouth slack in shock. You're serious, he says, his voice suddenly very, very small. Saints be damned, you're serious. Put that pistol down and let me fetch my ink pot and some paper. I can provide you with a letter of recommendation to my estate manager and enough money to make the journey, you continue. That goes for your companions as well. You can see suspicion and hope warring against each other in the man's expression for a long, tense moment. His brows knit as his eyes look to his sides, then back to you. The pistol in his hand wavers, then pulls away. I do not like this life, he says, at long last, his shoulders sagging. My men do not like this life either. If he can give us a way out of it, then we place ourselves in your hands. For if you can give us a way out, then we place ourselves in your hands. He steps back again as he uncocks his pistol and puts it away. Gather round, lads, he shouts. I think we can finally put all this rotten business behind us. At last. The former roadsman now, you suppose, eye you with a suspicion at first, but when you tell them who you are and what you mean to do, They begin to relax visibly. One of them even helps you unpack a folding table from your luggage as you fill up your pen and begin to work on a letter of safe conduct and introduction. At first, they huddle around you as you begin scratching out the first few lines, but then, one by one, they seem to lose interest. At one point, you glance up to see every one of them looking out towards the trees, or over to your coachman, or even at the expression on your face. Not a, not a one of not a one seems to be actually focused on the words you're writing. It seems that although they understand fully the significance of the letter you're writing, none of them actually read the words you're putting in it. That gives you a rather nasty idea. You could, of course, continue to write the letter of introduction that you promised, securing these men work on your estate. Or you could write a wholly different sort of message to your estate manager, an instruction to have these men arrested immediately and see them remanded to a royal court for trial. You've little doubt in your mind that when the account of a lord of the courts is as evidence, such a court will see these men now around you hanged in short order. In short, you will be tricking these men into delivering their own death warrants. It would be a wretched, ruthless thing to do. But what is waylaying and robbing travelers on the road if not wretched, ruthless villainy as well? Perhaps in this case, it would be best to repay evil with evil.
I like that phrase right there.
Um, it seems rather counterproductive to me to hire these men only to betray them. But no, I'm not going to go back on my word. I'll let them live. Now, my other playthrough, they're going to die. No, you will not betray these men. You've already given your word, and a gentleman ought to stand by his promises, whether they be made to a criminal or a king. You write the letter exactly as promised, declaring the bearers of your message to be under your protection and instructing Locke to ensure that a place be found for them. When you affix your seal to the paper and hand the letter to the former roadsman, they seem almost meek with gratitude. They drop the mocking my lord from their speech and replace it with a deferential sir, as if you were a beloved commanding officer rather than a man who they had just tried to rob. When you hand them the contents of your purse to help them on their way, one of them seems almost as if he's about to embrace you. Your letter in hand, they depart the way that you came, chattering excitedly amongst themselves. You bid them good fortune and continue on your way, satisfied that you've at least done some good today. Somehow, word or at least rumor of your encounter with the roadsman manages to spread ahead of you as you travel. At every traveler's inn you stop at, you're approached by at least one or two curious fellow travelers, each with their own idea of what exactly happened on that lonely stretch of road. Some of them give you accounts that would be utterly outlandish by any measure. Others manage to recount something very much like the truth. Not all of those who approach you seem to entirely approve of your methods, but the fact that you managed to talk your way out of the clutches of a heavily armed brigands certainly does engender a certain amount of respect, and you cannot object to that. Yet one thought tugs at your mind as you continue your journey, a line of thought which seems more and more distressing to you the longer you dwell upon it. Those roadsmen had been soldiers, and seasoned ones at that. Even if not for the way they spoke and the ragged remains of the uniforms they wore on their back, you would have known by the way they stood and the way they moved, if nothing else. Less than a year ago, they would have been veterans of the king's army, men you would have had to trust with your life, men you might have actually trusted with your life during your time in Antar. It gnaws at you even when you try to put it out of your mind. How could men who risk so much in the service of their king and their country so quickly resort to violating the king's peace and robbing their fellow countrymen? How could they have fallen so far, so fast? I mean, hey, the war was rough. The war was rough, the war was long, and now you come back to this, it's just, because you don't, like, there's certain aspects of that you see, even now today in our country but I think there's still kind of a general kind of respect for most soldiers, where it's just like, you were in the military, the things you did, it's not your fault. But this is definitely far worse. These people are being ran out, and stuff like that. Now, granted, in the United States too, while you do have a sort of kind of calm and respect when it comes to soldiers. We do have terrible health care for soldiers, and we don't have any sort of real help and things like that. I remember when I was in high school and I dropped out of high school, that was one of my first thoughts was to go to the military and things like that. It was a viable alternative. But at the same time, like nowadays, like even the military isn't a viable opportunity for a lot of people. I mean, it does help out a lot, but even still, the money that you get from that, it's only going to provide you with so much, and it's still going to be rough no matter what. So things are just tough. But at least you do have the option, and it can work out for you if you really kind of put into it. But this situation just seems like it's even worse because, again, these people don't have anything or had very little to begin with, and now they're coming back to absolutely nothing. And then on top of that, you have the taxes, and on top of that, you have people that are trying to run them out because of jobs and so on and so forth. So this is just a shit predicament all the way around. So it's in that sense that I do kind of agree with Wolfram that something does need to be done about the taxes. But at the same time, the king is also right because we do need to have a standing army. We also need to reform the army. So Wolfram goes too far, but the king also kind of goes too far to a certain degree as well. But I digress. The army taught them no trade save war. How else could they live in peace? War trains a man not only in how to fight and how to kill, but in how to live as well. When one lives off the land of an enemy, one learns to take what is needed, and that the only real law is that of the bayonet. For more than a decade, war has trained the men of the king's army in such a manner, with a method no less expert and no less thorough than that of a master's carpenter or a blacksmith. It is from that tutelage that they now graduated from, and for far too many, there's no other way. But those men are not in Nantar anymore. The attitudes which were once so encouraged, which inflicted upon the enemy, have now been turned upon their own country. The behavior which had been so necessary to their very survival at war marks them as brigands in a time of peace. Perhaps for such men, there's no other way of thinking. There will be no way out for such fellows, save at the end of a noose, a destiny which had unwittingly accepted the instant they enlisted themselves. Some part of you cannot help but feel sorry for them. The ship docks in Notoria on a rare sunny spring day to find the situation more dire than it had been the autumn before. The vagrants and beggars which had seemed so thick on the ground before seemed to have doubled in number, and your passage through the poorer parts of the city is marked with a distant, intense unease. Your clothing and accoutrements may seem practical in your eyes, but to the gaunt faces peeking out at you from alleyways and windows, it is still the finery of a lord. It isn't difficult to see the jealousy in their expressions, and yes, the resentment too. You waste no time in renting out the set of lodgings which you taken up during your last visit, but as you cram all your luggage into the series of cramped rooms, you know you will have to set up a more long-term living arrangement before you can even consider getting seriously involved in the politics of the capital. Okay, so the next choice we'll have is, of course, trying to see where we're going to live. And that's going to be a pain because, once again, I am broke. I do not have a lot of money. As you can see now, it's negative 208. Negative 208. I don't have money at all. I am going to have to take out loans because, good Lord, like, there's absolutely no money here. None at all. So, yeah, I'm going to have to hope that those loans, the interest, it has been, negotiated down, and hopefully that will kind of help cut into this. But I'm probably going to have to take out another loan, maybe about 5,000 crowns or so. But we'll see how it goes. I don't know right now how this is going to go, but we will see. Anywho, if you like the video, like the video. If you'd like to see more content like this, subscribe. I have a lot of things on the channel, and I will have many other things in the future. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to leave them in the comment section, and I will get back to them as soon as I possibly can. There have been quite a few comments regarding different choice of games to play and so on and so forth. I will definitely be taking a look at those, and I will see. I think one that was brought up actually was this game called Citadel. I believe I played it about a year or so ago. I can't remember. I play a lot of work in progress games, whips, on the choice of forums quite a bit. So, but I haven't really been going back to them lately because there's usually just not a lot of things that I want to play. There tends to be a lot of high fantasy things and stuff like that. Not that I have anything against high fantasy or modern fantasy or anything like that, but it's just I don't like to play them a lot of times because they tend to fall into certain tropes and certain stereotypes and stuff. So I kind of tend to stay away from them. But I've seen quite a few that looks very interesting, and I think I will take a look at a few of them, and Citadel is one of those that I will take a look at. I think what I might do, because I feel like this is going to be quite a long series, but I think what I might end up doing is throughout the week I might record Lords of Infinity, and then on the weekend I will record something else. So maybe a work in progress to see, just how people feel about certain games and stuff like that. Because again, there are so many choice of games out there. There are so many. So, and I've played quite a few of them. I actually have a folder on my phone full of nothing but choice of games, and it's so many. So yeah, if that's a good idea for certain for you guys, just let me know, and I will try to implement that as well. I am trying to start getting. It's easier for me to record these videos because there's not a whole lot of setup for this, so this is fine to do. But yeah, so yeah, by all means, send the requests for certain choice of games and work in progress. Let me know if there are any other work in progress out there that you all would like for me to play or take a look at and stuff like that. Again, I can play them on the weekend. Most of them are very short. There are some that are basically the entire damn game, but there are a lot of them too that are just kind of really short and quick ones, and I can just kind of knock those out and get them in there and have something on out for the weekend. But we will see. So again, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. See ya.